I spent my childhood, when my parents were still married, in the Midwest, just outside Chicago. In the 60s, the suburbs were smaller. The big malls hadn't been built yet. We still enjoyed a lot of open space. The house we lived in was set back on a gravel road. I remember cornfields and meadows nearby. Woods, too. When I went to visit my friends Phil and Marion for the first time in rural Ontario, I was surprised at how much the Canadian landscape reminded me of where I grew up. Of course, I'd just come from visiting my father, and he was heavy on my mind. Phil and I became friends because I liked his films so much. He and Marion had both done a lot of work with memory and family histories. As I looked at their farm and remembered my childhood, Phil loaded the camera, and I started to tell stories. He wasn't home much, only on weekends, because he worked as a traveling insurance salesman. Picture this, a man with a thick Spanish accent who had immigrated to the States when he was 32 years old, crisscrossing the Midwest in his Chevy Impala, selling life insurance to farmers in Iowa, Illinois, Ohio, Indiana, Missouri, Wisconsin. And he was good at it. A couple of times a year, he'd take me along, and I'd help him find the cities and towns on the map so we could plan our route. When we got there, I'd play with the kids and with the animals. I got to see rich and poor and in between, and to know another way of life. Phil turned 40 that year. In the talk about birthdays, we discovered that Marion and I were born on the same date. It felt so safe to think about the past with these two friends around.
Oh, you guys act.
I never know what to do when a camera's pointed at me.
How would you act if you were standing here, Phil, in front of the camera with Wayne and I?
Well, if I was doing something, then I would just keep doing it.
What if you
But
were?
now Wayne has sort of done what he had to do,
Right.
and you're
Well, she's doing what she's doing.
doing what you're doing. So I do what you're doing, but maybe not exactly.
But what if you weren't doing anything?
Then I would stand there and say, I never know what to do when the camera's pointed at me, and I have nothing to do. Carol, what do you got there?
Marion was writing a thesis that had the reconstruction of memory at its center. In particular, she remembered painful episodes with her abusive father. She talked about a severe illness that she'd had several years back, right after she finished some intense memory work on this difficult subject. She'd been quite well since that time, but she wondered if bad memories could cause illness. When I was 5 years old, I wondered what people meant when they used the word love. I knew it wasn't something I could point at, like ball, and it wasn't a simple action, like run. I thought about it sometimes. One summer day, my dad took our dog for a walk. This was unusual, but I was glad because Chico was a big dog, and whenever I took him for a walk, he always pulled me off my feet and ran away. Some irate person on the other side of town would find him. When Dad came home, he was carrying an empty leash. "Did Chico run away again?" I asked. "No," he said, and then he told me that he'd gotten rid of Chico because he was too much trouble. He gave him to the pound. "But I loved him," I cried. Last night I had a dream that I went shopping with Madonna. This is vitamin C.
What happened with Donna?
We were shopping and then, I guess, I don't know where we were. It was like, maybe it was New York, but then it was sort of LA, and it was very, very crowded, and there was some sort of like a new mall that neither of us had seen, and she said, "Oh, let's go in here," and then we got separated. I think she like saw somebody else that she knew, and anyway, we got separated by the crowd. These are Chinese. I still remember that dream about Madonna. So this is like my dish. When she left me for someone else, I felt hurt, abandoned, lost. It sounds so silly. It's just a dream, and I've never met Madonna.
Yeah.
But I also remember how unwilling I felt to talk that morning about the emotions I had in the dream. I take for sleep, and I don't count that out. I just sort of take that at bedtime. This is Biaxin, which is an antibiotic. It's actually kind of a new antibiotic that was, brought to market just within the last year and a half or 2 years, I think. And I take that as prophylaxis to prevent pneumonia, I think. I don't know. I don't even remember anymore. There's aspirin that I just keep around because I need it from time to time. Whenever I cried because I had bumped myself or fallen, my father would say, "It doesn't hurt." Throughout my childhood, if I displeased him, he would chase and corner me. I remember his huge bulk towering above me as I shrunk from the lashes of his belt. When I was a teenager, after my parents divorced, he bullied me for my loyalty to Mom. He'd wait until I was someplace where I couldn't get away, like in a moving car, and harangue me with all the awful things he could think to say about her. It always ended with me in tears, until sometime when I was around 14 or 15, when I consciously decided he would never see me cry again. I still don't cry easily, except at the movies. Back at home, Mickey helped me to process these memories. I'm afraid it wasn't always easy. Once, when we were driving in the car, Mickey scolded me for being late, and suddenly I felt like I was 14 again, driving with my father on a long road trip, being berated and feeling helpless because I couldn't leave. At a stoplight, I just got out of the car and walked away from Mickey. In that moment of leaving, I thought I'd grown up. Dear Dad, I haven't been in touch lately because I've become aware of how troubled my relationship to you still is, even after all these years. What I will always have from you is a legacy of anger that comes from the physical and emotional abuse I suffered at your hand. I regret the pain I've caused you, and so I feel compassion for you, I know I haven't been easy for you to handle, and I know that you never consciously set out to harm me for life. It's just what happened. Sooner or later, I'm going to have to tell you something more, and this is as good a time as any, especially as it helps to explain my need for honesty about all this. While I am quite healthy, I do have AIDS. One of the ways I cope with it is to take control of as much of my life as I can, to do what I need to do for myself first, and not talking to you for a while is what I need to do right now. I've been afraid to tell you about my health because, quite frankly, I've been afraid you would try to see me more often. I see one of the best doctors in town. I take several different drugs plus vitamins and herbs every day. I exercise with weights regularly and ride a bicycle to work and manage to keep my health up and the terror at bay. I can imagine that this letter will make you want to talk to me about many things. I'm just not ready. I know you're concerned, and I know you love me, and I hope you can find a way to handle all this that's not too difficult. Please know that it's not my intention to cause you distress. Rather, I'm letting you know of my distress and of my needs in coping with that distress. I'm doing my best to find a place of comfort.
So when you say you're on anti this and anti that, like, you're on antibiotics prophylactically?
Yeah, like I take Septra, which prevents pneumocystis pneumonia,
Mm-hmm.
and acyclovir, which prevents herpes,
Mm-hmm.
and Biaxin, which, I don't know, I think that might be against pneumonia too.
Mm.
in my ambitol, and I don't even remember what that's for. I used to know. It used to be so important to me to like know what all of these drugs were and what the dosage was and what they were used for and when to start them and everything. And as I get more and more into it, it's like I have less interest, you know. It's like with this new pigeon, you asked me what's the normal white blood cell count, or what is my white blood cell count, and a couple of years ago I would have been able to tell you exactly.
What do you think that's from, that change?
I think in the beginning I felt like knowing was gonna stave off the progression of the disease, and now I don't feel like it matters. It's kind of boring after a while. And there's sort of this feeling I have of like, if they come up with a magic bullet that's gonna, cure AIDS, I'm gonna know about it, and I'm gonna take it then, but like until then, like, I just feel like it's a waste of time to sort of place undue hope in these various sort of intermediary treatments.
That's a pretty big step to make, I would think. Not that you don't have hope, but that you don't have false hope. The false hope being knowing can control the spread of the virus, or having all of these facts and figures and details in your head can somehow, almost sort of physically create a barrier to the spread. Like giving up on that, I would think that would be a pretty big thing.
I went to see my father for the first time in almost 4 years. I almost didn't go. I'd spoken to him a couple of weeks ago and told him I might be coming to LA. I said I'd let him know when my plans firmed up. When I finally called him back, I'd been there 3 days already. I actually picked up the phone to dial and hung it up again. Finally, I decided not to be tyrannized by our past, or by my fear. He's so nice and supportive and concerned about me now, so easy to be around in one way, because he obviously loves me so much. But it's that love that makes it so hard to be around him, too. That love was always there, even as he hurt me when I was young. And it's that love that makes me so ambivalent toward him. I brought along pictures from the trip I took to England with my lover, Mickey. He appears in about half the photos, and this was the first time my father had ever seen him. Dad never mentioned him. We went through a box of old family photographs. He held up a picture of him and me. We're sitting on the couch in the den, he with his arm around me. "How dare you tell me I didn't love you?" he asked. In the same pile of photos is a picture of him with my dog, Chico. About a year later, a friend of ours who works for Austrian state television came to find out what it was like to live in San Francisco, where being gay is so normal, and where we live with so much death. Mickey is Austrian and I have AIDS, and we were getting married. And we kind of blew their minds.
San Francisco ist nicht nur als Touristenmagnet und Hightech-Zentrum bekannt. Zum Ruhm der Stadt haben die Studenten- und Hippie-Bewegung ebenso beigetragen wie ihre gesellschaftliche Toleranz. Als Welthauptstadt der Schwulen wird San Francisco oft bezeichnet und verdient diese Auszeichnung auch. Der Österreicher Michael Ehrenzweig ist schon vor 20 Jahren nach San Francisco gezogen, um hier freier zu leben, wie er sagt. Und am 1. November hat er im Rathaus seinen Lebenspartner Wayne geheiratet.
Greetings.
Hi. Hello.
Greetings.
There are going to be lots of people.
I'm ready. That's fine. Come on in and make yourself at home. Look how beautiful. Be comfortable. That's cute to wait. From back And now that you have joined yourself through this agreement, may you strive all the days of your lives to keep this commitment with the same love and devotion that you now possess. By the virtue of the authority vested in me by the county clerk, I now pronounce you domestic partners. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Or something. I mean, I'm not organized.
And then secondly, I want to toast my parents because...
Secondly,
well, we're moving into the more important. It's
Barbara.
the inner
It hasn't even gotten to me. I don't know what number I'm gonna be.
I think, you know, it's been not always easy between me and my parents, I think.
Thank you, Fred. We love you just the same.
I know, that's the thing. I've been so difficult for both of you, I know. Sometimes.
No, it isn't.
And you've been difficult for me. And, you know, my mom and my dad haven't seen each other in 23 years. And they came together after all that time because of their love for me. It's just so fabulous.
Well, we're glad they made you, Wayne.
You deserve it, my son.
Here,
You
here.
deserve it.
Thanks to Mom and Dad.
We love you very much.
one thing good.
Wayne and Mickey, I am from Guatemala. I am from a Latin extraction, pure Latin and Indian blood, and very, very different for us to conceive and to admit that there are different ways how people can love each other. Not that we don't have gay people in Latin America, but as usually, of course, like in many other countries, they always been in the closet, as you said. I had learned to be a very liberal-minded, and I had the experience to, after I had considered myself a big Latin lover and have 3 wives and 7 children to attest, I do have one sensitive, no less wonderful son on Wayne, and I always had loved him for what he is as a person, as an individual, with his own desires, tastes, and whatever. And I'm so very glad to be able to come here and attest that I do love him, and we approve, my whole family and myself, the act that you two got together. And I just really hope that you stay longer than I was married to my other wife.
My friend Richard told me something that I didn't understand, but it seems clearer now. It was about the legacy that people with AIDS leave to generations of survivors. He said it benefits the whole culture to see people with AIDS conquer their demons, to find peace in their lives before they die. A legacy of peace, not struggle, of contentment, not confusion.
Phil came to the wedding with a bunch of film in his suitcase. We were going to spend the next week editing. Marion couldn't come because she hadn't been feeling well for the past few months, and suddenly she felt much worse. 2 days after the wedding ceremony, on Sunday, Phil said he had to leave. Marion was having trouble breathing, and her doctor wanted to perform a lung biopsy. The biopsy was done on Thursday. By noon, they heard the news. Cancer. Somehow, Marion's body had grown cancer everywhere. They don't know where it started. And like my HIV, it had grown silently, invisibly, ferociously. Somehow, it hadn't made her feel ill, really ill, until just recently. On Sunday, exactly 2 weeks after Phil left, Marion died. Several years ago, after Marion had recovered from the severe illness she had told me about, the one she had after her intense memory work, she wrote about it in her journal. She wrote, "When I finally acknowledged that I was ill, I immediately tried to make sense out of my experience. I couldn't help but think there was a connection between what I was now feeling physically and what I had been experiencing psychically during the writing of my thesis. I also found myself laying blame and chastising myself for not having left the past well enough alone. How can we reclaim memories without them then becoming burdensome? I traveled to a forgotten past in order to understand a fragmented present. What I retrieved was a pent-up history of abuse and violence that I sometimes, usually afterwards, thought best left hidden. What I am beginning to understand is that insight does not come suddenly, but rather slowly and repetitively." As I read Marion's words, I think, memories hurt, certainly.
But can they also cause disease? When we reclaim the past, what do we unleash? And what do we release? What I am beginning to understand is that insight does not come suddenly, but rather slowly and repetitively.